Good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, March 2nd, 5:31 a.m. Central Time as I speak here. May corn futures up 4 3/4 at 640 and a half. May soybeans up 3.5 at 1497 3/4. May Chicago wheat up 6 1/4 at 716 1/4. May Kansas City wheat up 4 1/4 at 820 and a half. May spring wheat up 2 3/4 at 866 1/4. I was slightly hesitant to talk about this first story, but I'm going to do it because I think it's relevant to a whole bunch of you guys. Potential and former President Donald Trump pitched a new proposal this week that would overhaul U.S. trade relations with China. I'm going to preface this, guys, by saying that I have no political opinion here. This is news that I believe is relevant to you guys potentially. If you want to argue about politics, do it in the comment section. Leave me out of it. Back to the story. So Trump is not in the White House. I understand that. Yet there is a very real chance, of course, that Trump is in the White House again following the 2024 election. You look at the Vegas odds. Biden's the favorite, followed closely by DeSantis and then Trump. And then you've got your outlier candidates, your Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, Nikki Haley, people like that. But this appears to be a three-man race right now, Biden and then DeSantis and Trump on the Republican side. So back to the story. Trump had this video on his campaign website, which was really kind of an anti-China proposal. He is essentially calling for tariffs on Chinese goods, among other things. And this was upsetting, I believe, to Republicans from farm states. Kelly Armstrong, who's a representative from North Dakota, Republican, said this: there are serious trade disparities that should rightfully be raised, but we should be honest about the potential economic impact to rural America. Senator Tommy Tuberville, Republican from Alabama, said this: I can understand what he's doing. China is our biggest adversary, but we've got to be careful about tariffs on farmers. Now, you guys remember the trade war time frame. Of course, soybeans were really cheap. China didn't buy a whole lot. There were some issues going on during that time frame. They had African swine fever. They didn't necessarily need to buy the soybeans from us. Maybe things are different this time around. But this is something that is going to become more important, these sort of issues, as we approach that 2024 election. Russia says that it will only renew the Black Sea grain deal if its own agricultural exports are considered. So this current agreement expires on March 18th. It's coming up. While Russian agricultural exports have not been specifically targeted by Western sanctions, Russia continues to claim that restrictions on banks, logistics companies, and insurers are barriers to export. Moscow's foreign minister said this week. The Russian side stressed that continuing the package agreement on grain is possible only if the interests of Russian agricultural and fertilizer producers in terms of unhindered access to world markets are taken into account. Just early this morning, Russia's minister accused the West of shamelessly burying the Black Sea grain deal. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken spoke at the G20 in India this week, and he says that Russia has been deliberately and systematically creating a backlog of Ukrainian grain shipments while moving forward with its own exports of food grain and fertilizer. So there is just a lot of bickering and arguing here. Russia is, in fact, exporting wheat in particular, and a whole bunch of it. They had a big crop. They're offering the cheapest wheat on the global market. There's been a lot of talk about Russia delaying inspections of grain in Ukraine. So this is a lot of talk and posturing. Does this result in Russia exiting the grain deal? I'm not too sure, but they are talking tough, at least here for the moment. Some groups are raising their Brazilian corn and soybean production estimates, kind of all over the place, especially with the corn production estimate. Well-followed private group StoneX pegged the Brazilian soybean crop at 154.6, up from 154.2 previously. USDA is at 153. We've seen some estimates drop as of late because of harvest delays and because of drought in the south. StoneX not on that page, apparently. StoneX, more interestingly to me, they've got the corn crop now at 130.6. They were 123.5 previously. I'm not sure why the change of heart here. USDA is at 125. Now, CONAB, which is like Brazil's USDA, they've got the corn crop at 123.7. So you've got CONAB at 123.7. You've got StoneX now above 130. The difference between those two estimates, 7 million metric tons, that's like 275 million bushels. Big difference. You know, there's a lot that remains to be seen when it comes to that second Brazilian corn crop. They've got some planting delays. What does the weather do? We don't quite know, but a lot of varying ideas out there. The EPA has recommended the approval of year-round E15 ethanol sales in some states. Governors from Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, Ohio, South Dakota, and Wisconsin petitioned EPA last year to remove the 1-pound RVP waiver from summer gasoline ethanol blended in to fuel. So they're going to go for year-round E15 here. The EPA proposed, however, an effective date of April 2024, which was not acceptable to ethanol advocates and the ethanol lobby. Renewable Fuels Association Chief Jeff Cooper said this: "While we're glad to see EPA is finally taking action to approve the governor's petition, we're frustrated and disappointed that the agency is proposing to kick the can on implementation until 2024. There is simply no justification for further delaying this action, which is already months overdue. By law, EPA should have finalized approval of the governor's petition more than 7 months ago, which would have given the marketplace more than enough time to adjust and prepare for implementation this summer." So, yeah, it sounds like year-round E15 maybe beginning next year. We would have liked to have seen it a little bit earlier, of course. Now, speaking of ethanol production, U.S. production declined slightly last week. Weekly ethanol production, 1.003 million barrels per day. That was down 2.5% on the week and down fractionally versus the same week last year. Mostly normal seasonal print. Ethanol stocks were down more than 3% on the week and down 1% versus the same week last year. We are still at the third highest level of ethanol stocks on record seasonally, behind only 2022 and I think 2020. Implied U.S. gasoline demand is improving, up 2.3% last week and up 4% versus the same week last year. We've seen improved gasoline demand statistics for 3 consecutive weeks now. It appears to be normalizing, so a continuation of strong gasoline demand could help to perhaps draw down the historically large stocks of ethanol. You've also got some improved ethanol production margins given the recent decline in corn prices. Looking at spot margins, even some of these areas out west with the real strong cash corn markets maybe break even to even slightly profitable now, whereas they weren't a couple weeks ago. We've got an export sales report this morning at 7:30 a.m. Central Time. For the current marketing year, corn sales expected 500 to 1 million, soybeans 300 to 850 expected, wheat 150 to 600 expected. Cattle market took a breather yesterday, was down a little bit, kind of a corrective action. That's the way I describe it. U.S. dollars a little bit higher this morning. The stock market's mixed. S&P down, Dow Jones is up. Gold's up $3. Crude oil up 54 cents in the April WTI at 78.22. Have a great day, guys. I'll talk to you Friday.